The email came through at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the timestamp because I checked it 3 times, thinking I'd misread the sender. It was from Colonel Richardson. "I need to discuss some concerning behavior regarding your recent promotion to captain," it said. "My office. 0800 hours. Come alone." I was standing in my kitchen in Seoul at the time. I was stationed at Camp Humphreys, and I literally sat down on the floor. Not elegantly. I just sort of collapsed into a crouch against the refrigerator, the phone glowing in my hand like some small hostile sun. My roommate walked past me and didn't even ask. She'd learned by then that sometimes I just needed to sit on the floor. The promotion had come through exactly 5 days earlier. Captain, the rank I'd been working toward for 4 years. I called my parents. My mother cried. Good tears, she said. The kind that meant she was proud. Now I was being called into Richardson's office like I'd done something wrong. And the vague language, concerning behavior, was doing something to my chest that felt like a fist slowly closing. I didn't sleep that night, and I kept wondering the same thing over and over. What did he know? Or worse, what did he think he knew? Here's the thing about Colonel Richardson. He'd always been the type to remember your coffee order and forget your name. Charming in meetings. Quick with a compliment that somehow made you feel smaller instead of better. I'd first noticed something was off about 8 months earlier, right around the time the promotion evaluation cycle started. That's when the patterns began. It wasn't one thing. It was the accumulation of small discrete choices that somehow added up to a shape I recognized. The same shape other women in our unit had been moving around for years. Captain Sarah Morse, who'd been passed over for promotion twice, once mentioned that Richardson had questioned whether she was really committed to a career in the military, or if she was just using the job as a stepping stone. Funny thing, he never asked the men that question. I sat with that detail. In January, I gave a presentation on logistics optimization that everyone agreed improved our supply chain efficiency by 17%. Measurable. Documented. Richardson's response in front of the full room. Well, I'm sure you have a very capable team helping you sort through the details. Not, great work. Not even, you've made smart decisions. It was someone else did this. Then there was the morning in March when Richardson called me into his office and asked if I was comfortable with the travel demands of the promotion track. He didn't ask anyone else. I learned later that he'd asked Captain James Chun if he felt ready for more responsibility. Different question. Same outcome they were looking for probably, but they'd never say that out loud. By April, I'd started keeping a journal. Not in some dramatic legal protection way, I didn't think that far ahead. I was just noticing, writing down the moments that made me feel like I was failing at something I couldn't quite name. April 16th. Richardson asked why I looked tired. I was wearing the same uniform I always wear. He didn't ask anyone if they looked tired. April 28th. Passed over for the Beijing liaison role. The email said the position required someone with less complicated scheduling demands. I don't have kids. I don't have a partner. My schedule is empty. May 3rd. The promotion recommendation came through. I should have been happy. Instead, I felt like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Some part of me already knew it was falling toward my head. The night before the meeting with Richardson, I did something I'm not proud of. I called Lieutenant Jackson, one of the few officers in the unit I actually trusted, and I asked him if he'd heard anything. Rumors. Speculation. Anything. There was a long pause on the phone. Jackson was sitting in his quarters, and I could hear the sound of traffic outside. Seoul traffic. 3 a.m. in my timeline, which meant it was 3 p.m. there, which meant he'd probably been drinking coffee and thinking about dinner. There's talk, he said finally. Richardson's been saying, look, Captain, I don't know if I should be telling you this. Tell me. He's been saying that the promotion came too fast. That there were questions about how you moved up so quickly. That maybe there was favoritism involved. I remember my hand going numb. Literally. I couldn't feel my fingers against the phone. What kind of favoritism? Another pause. Longer this time. The kind where he implies you're sleeping with General Morrison. General Morrison, the deputy commander. A man I'd spoken to exactly 4 times. All of them in group settings. One of them was at a holiday party. The conversation lasted approximately 90 seconds and was about base infrastructure. That's insane, I said. I know, Jackson said quietly. But people are listening. And it sounds better than other explanations, doesn't it? It's easier for some people to believe than the alternative. The alternative being what? That you earned it. I didn't go to bed that night either. I lay down at 5 a.m. because the sun was coming up and my body was confused about whether it was reasonable to stay awake any longer. I slept for 42 minutes. I counted. The walk to Richardson's office took 4 minutes. I'd walked it 100 times before, but never feeling like my uniform was made of lead. His door was closed. I stood outside it for maybe 30 seconds, which is a long time to stand outside a closed door in a military hallway. Other officers walked past. Did they know? Had they heard? I knocked. Come in. Richardson was sitting behind his desk in the kind of pose that suggested he'd been preparing for this moment. Hands folded. Face arranged into something that might have been concern if you didn't look too closely. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat down. Captain, he started. Thank you for coming in. I want to talk to you about something sensitive. I didn't say anything. I was trying to remember the breathing exercises from basic training, the ones where you're supposed to feel in control. There have been some conversations, discussions about your promotion timeline. And I have to ask you directly, has there been any kind of inappropriate relationship between you and anyone in a higher command position? I stared at him. The fluorescent light above his desk was making a soft buzzing sound that suddenly felt very loud. No, I said. There hasn't. Because, he continued, and I want to be honest with you, this is becoming a concern. Some of the men in the unit have questions about whether the advancement was earned. He'd said it like it was in quotation marks, even though his mouth never moved that way. That's when something in me shifted. It was very small, like a lock clicking, very quiet. Which men? I asked. Pardon. Which specific men have expressed this concern? Richardson blinked. That wasn't the response he was expecting. He'd been expecting me to cry maybe, or get defensive, or explain myself in a way that would give him ammunition. That's not relevant. It's completely relevant, I said. I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. If you're going to tell me that people are questioning my competence, I want to know who those people are. I want to know what they're basing their concerns on. Specific examples. Data. Not rumors. Captain, I'm not here to. You're not here to what? Do your job. I felt something like anger, but it was colder than anger. It was clarity. You're here to tell me that I don't deserve something I earned based on unsubstantiated gossip. So either tell me who's saying this, what specific evidence they have, or we can conclude that there's no legitimate concern here. Richardson stood up. I stayed sitting. You're being insubordinate. I'm asking for specifics instead of accepting vague accusations, I said. In the military, we call that following protocol. He walked to his window. Didn't look out of it, really. Just stood there facing away from me. I could see his shoulders breathing. In and out. The same breathing I'd finally gotten under control. When he turned back around, something had shifted in his face. Not quite anger. Something more like panic. What happens in this office stays in this office, he said quietly. That's when I understood. He wasn't trying to protect the unit from me. He was trying to protect himself from something. No, I said. I stood up then. No, it doesn't. If you're making accusations about my conduct, this goes to the Inspector General. That's how the military handles it. That's what the regulations say. I walked to the door. My hand was on the handle when he spoke. If you file a report, it'll look like you're covering something up. I turned around. Or it'll look like I'm doing exactly what an officer should do when they're accused of misconduct without evidence. which is demand a formal investigation. I opened the door and left. I filed the report that afternoon. I-2947 RMS. That's the file number. I remember it the way you remember the day you got stitches or the password to something important. The investigation took 21 days. During those 21 days, nothing happened and everything happened simultaneously. The word was out, not about what I'd accused Richardson of, but about the fact that I'd filed a complaint. And in the microcosm of a military unit, that was enough to make people reconsider their sides. Captain Sarah Morse came to my quarters on day 9 with a folder. Inside were emails. Dozens of them. She'd been keeping her own records for 3 years. Exchanges where Richardson told her she was too emotional for leadership roles. Text messages where he told another officer that Major Elena Corey was trying to make a name for herself on the back of the unit, which somehow translated to, she didn't sleep her way up. I should have done this years ago, Sarah said. You're doing it now, I told her. Lieutenant Jackson submitted a formal statement about the conversations he'd heard. Jackson's statement came with dates and times and the names of other officers who'd been present. It turned out Richardson had been having the same conversation with multiple people, trying to build a consensus that couldn't actually be a consensus because it was all built on nothing. By day 16, the IG investigator, Major Patricia Lynn, a woman who had the face of someone who'd heard every lie the military had to offer and wasn't impressed by any of them, pulled me in for a second interview. He's walking it back, she said. It wasn't a question. What do you mean? He's saying he was expressing a concern that had been brought to him, that he wasn't personally questioning your promotion, that his initial phrasing was misunderstood. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. The kind of tired where you realize that someone had decided in advance that the truth didn't matter. They were just going to keep changing the story until it became a story people believed. Is the investigation closing? I asked. No, Major Lynn said. But we're finding some other things. She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask her to. Day 23. I was in the office when Colonel Richardson was formally removed from his position. Not discharged. Not court-martialed, though the IG investigation found enough evidence of systematic misconduct to recommend further action at a higher level. What they'd found over the course of those 21 days was a pattern that went back 7 years. 7 years of conversations where Richardson had suggested that female officers' promotions were suspect. 7 years of recommending male officers for positions while telling female officers that they needed more seasoning. 7 years of subtle, poisonous messaging that had shaped the culture of the entire unit. It wasn't just me. It was never just me. The promotion itself had been legitimate. I'd earned it. But the accusation had been real too. It was real in the way that lies are real. They affect things. They move things. They change the texture of the ground you're standing on. My mother called the day after Richardson's removal. She'd heard through someone who'd heard from someone the way news travels in a family where people still have connections to bases and retired officers and the kind of loosely woven network of military people that exists outside the official structure. You did good, she said. I did my job, I said. That's what I said. You did good. But here's what I didn't tell her. I wasn't happy. I wasn't angry or satisfied or relieved or any of the things I'd expected to feel when this moment arrived. I was something more complicated. Because Richardson's removal didn't change the fact that the lie had existed. It didn't change the fact that some people had been ready to believe it. It didn't change the fact that doubt, once planted, doesn't really die, it just gets quiet. 6 months later, I'm in my quarters late on a Friday night, and Sarah Morse is sitting on my couch drinking coffee because we've gotten into the habit of Friday debriefs. She's up for promotion now. The evaluation is expected back in 3 weeks. Are you nervous? I ask her. Terrified, she says. But not in the same way. I know what's waiting now. At least I know where to look. She means the doubt, the skepticism, the questions that come with being a woman in a position where men had always been before. That's when something settles in me. Not peace exactly. Not acceptance. Something more like understanding. The thing I learned, the thing that matters, isn't that I won or he lost. That narrative is too small. The thing that matters is this: integrity costs something. It costs sleep. It costs the easy path. It costs the ability to just accept the lie and move on. But the cost of not having it costs more. It costs the ground beneath your feet. If you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, something that seemed designed to undermine everything you'd worked for, you know what I'm talking about. You know what it feels like to have to choose between silence and the thing that might destroy you if you speak. You know the particular loneliness of that moment. What I didn't know until later is that you're never really making that choice alone. You're making it in a room full of other people who are watching to see what you'll do. And some of them, the ones who matter, are waiting for someone to go first. I went first. Sarah's going next. In a few years, someone else will stand in a corridor trying to remember how to breathe, and maybe they'll think about how someone before them chose the harder thing. Maybe that will be enough. I still think about the moment I stood in Richardson's office and felt the clarity arrive. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't a triumph. It was just the moment I decided that the version of myself that was true mattered more than the version he wanted me to be. The rest is just what happened after that decision.